Chapter 2.8, Photography, Part 1. The last few chapters, I have to admit, I really have a bias toward sculpture and architecture, and photography is another one that I really enjoy. We skip around, we don't cover all of section 2, Media and Process. I wish we could, but this book is so in-depth with each thing that I kind of had to pick and choose. And I did pick some of my favorites. Normally I do cover like 2.7 with graphic arts and so on. And craft, of course, I have a long history with craft myself, but we're doing what we're doing because there's just only so many hours in the day. I'm sure you will agree that this class is very challenging time-wise to begin with. And our new book, this one, The Gateways, is quite long. All right, so we're going to get into film to digital. And the word for photography derives from the Greek writing with light, and we're collecting the image, the film, the negatives and positives, digital, and we'll get into pixels and computer images a little bit, and then how do camera mechanics relate to the human eye. So the photography roots are in the camera obscura, and it's Latin for dark room. Camera means room, obscura is dark. So it was used for centuries as an aid to drawing, and David Hockney, who is still living, he's in his 80s, he kind of got excited, I think maybe 15, 20 years ago, about re-entering and using the camera obscura with his paintings, because he goes for some realistic things at times. But at any rate, this was something that was in use, but the idea of a fixed image, an image that was something you captured and carried around, did not happen until the 1800s. So I know it's really hard for you to think about, but photography is a fairly new medium in the world. It's only been around for about 160 years, let's say, 150 roughly. Okay, so digital cameras, 1980s. This is an image of a camera obscura. Now, there's some interesting artists that still play around with this, and we're going to look at one in a moment, but the idea that through a pinhole, a little tiny small hole, the light would come through and it would reverse itself and flip over, and you would have this vase here this way and so on. And you see how it says A, B, C, and then it relates to E, F, G here. Very interesting device. This was used in the real world by creating a room that was more portable, and an artist would go somewhere and there'd be a little pinhole. It would project on the wall and they would trace it. Then they go back to the studio, flip the painting. This would be a canvas. I'm sorry, I'm not explaining it well. The canvas, flip this over, and then paint on it accurately in terms of scale and proportion and perspective. It would all be very straightforward mathematically without having to do anything like gridding, which we do today. Okay, so it's a small hole in aperture in a darkened room. So the outside scene is flipped over. I love this photographer, or this, I guess you're going to call him photographer, artist. He sets up a camera obscura in rooms where he travels, and this one is the Pantheon in the Hotel Grand Homes. Now, this is not our Pantheon in Rome. We are in France. But anyway, he's setting this up on a window in a hotel he's staying on so that the Pantheon that we look at here, and I believe this is a Renaissance structure, but it has the same name, is projected on a wall or multiple walls. There's a dividing line here, a corner of a room. Isn't that amazing? I just think it's so interesting. Now, these get set up periodically. A museum will host a photography show or something like that, or sometimes even in a science museum they'll do this because they like to explain the physics of it. But it's something that you will sometimes get the opportunity to see such a thing, and you can create one too. Don't get me into that. I'm sure there's a YouTube. All right, so he would turn the whole room into this camera obscura by putting something in the window, and he's in Paris here, and he's projecting this upside down image, so it's temporary. Don't get confused. He's photographing he's using his camera to take a photograph of a camera obscura. All right, so this is perhaps the earliest known photograph in 1826. Holy smokes. So this particular piece, the methodology is unknown. Niepce, or Niepce, I don't exactly know how to say his name, the view from the window at La Grasse. He kept this secret, how he did it, but later he worked with Mr. Daguerre, and we get into daguerreotypes. So this is one of the first fixed images. You can see it's a bit rough, but he figures out how to capture it. What are we calling it? I guess we're not calling it a specific type. Okay, so he gets into, this is confusing. Daguerreotypes are a metal plate down here, but we don't know how he did the initial image we look up there. So this is Daguerre is making a daguerreotype of the city, Boulevard du Temple, in 1838. And this is super famous. You're going to see this anytime they talk about photography. Almost always you're going to see this photo. Now what's amazing here is that this is a busy, busy street. But look at the sidewalks. Look at the boulevard. Not a darn thing happening. Well, part of the reason that is, or the actual reason I should say, is that it's a long exposure. This has to be held open to let the light in and fix itself onto the iodine treated metal plate. There's some other chemicals there, mercury vapor, which is quite toxic. But anyway, he would use a polished metal plate with silver iodine, and this is what we call a positive. So it's a one-off. The light comes through, it hits this plate, and the image is captured on the plate. The only person that we see, or persons, is a man getting his shoes shined. The reason he shows up is because he's holding still for a good long amount of time getting his shoes shined. But it's quite interesting, and kind of goes into where part of the fallacy or the fakeness of photography, the non-truth or non-veracity of photography from the very beginning. 8 to 10 minutes. Okay. So here we have a variety of negative and positive processes. Cyanotypes, calotypes, collodion on wet plate, and albumin prints, gelatin silver prints. Gelatin silver prints are probably the most common. This is a really interesting piece, Anna Atkins. Now this is a little bit, this is early, but this is something that is the same process as blueprints. A cyanotype is a blueprint. Nowadays blueprints are done digitally and they're printed on a black and white printer, but back when they used to just expose drawings to make copies out of them in this process. So whatever is on the white paper, the object, like a branch here, it remains white, and the sun, the exposure to the sun on this treated paper turns blue. So cyan is our color, and this is a cyanotype. This is some British algae. So it's light sensitive paper, this piece of algae that's put on there. So the areas exposed to light turn dark, and the shaded places are stay white. Now Rauschenberg, you might note, takes this into play and does these large-scale cyanotypes with whole figures in the late 40s, early 50s. So it looks like a negative, but it's a cyanotype, which is like a blueprint.